One of the most important articles we've put out in recent times is up at Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com, our news websites. Why the banking elite want riots in America. Civil War II, the economic imperative for mass social unrest. And that ties in to, of course, people calling for civil war and the killing of police in mass on the so-called left and the praising of their hero, Chris Dorner. Whether this is a real story or not, it has a lot of telltale signs that it is real, but they won't let a good crisis go to waste. You better believe that. But again, that's coming up at the bottom of the hour. Now, we're also streaming video at InfoWarsNews.com or PrisonPlanet.tv. We'll also get you there. And so I want to show viewers some numbers and a basic equation here. As I break down the fact that America and the West are being deindustrialized and economically imploded by design. And this is what Agenda 21 is all about. And knowing this can turn everything around. If we can ever have a real debate with the ruling political class and the minions they're buying and selling, then it can be game over for them. But let's explain something. Throughout history, and this is covered in the book that we sell, None Dare Call a Conspiracy, that was out of print for a long time, by Gary Allen, who was working with people like Larry McDonald in Congress and others to expose this, that a tiny, tiny elite, not 2%, but much smaller than that, is anti-free market, and that everywhere they get in control throughout history, it's the same oligarchical system of crony capitalism, crony insider monopolyism. Every time they get in control, the middle class disappears, a giant underclass is formed, and a tiny elite then segregates themselves into protected areas, walled cities within the city, controlling the general population. And this is the real political paradigm. In fact, if you're watching on TV, I want to show people an article here out of the London Guardian. It says, shocking figures reveal the growth in UK's wealth gap. The middle class is disappearing. The poor are surging in numbers, but a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction, they say 1%. I actually went and did the math on there. It's less than 1/10 of 1%, has seen a ultra-massive increase in their wealth. There's been a 18 to 19% drop in the poor in what they've been making, and a huge increase, depending on how you break the numbers down, in the so-called rich. And then the Organization for Economic Cooperative Development, that's what did the Marshall Plan. That's the banking receivership arm of the UN. That's the real global government. At the heart of it is the OECD, key Organization of Economic Cooperative Development. They're on all the big global government treaties, you name it. They then criticize themselves and their own policies, offering socialism as the solution to no jobs, no economy, no system, where they've used regulations and bureaucracy to wreck everything. So there's just one example. Now the ultra, not even 1/10 of 1%. It's way past that. They want to blame the 2%. The local person that makes $500,000 a year, that's got boats, that's got cars, that comes to your restaurant, that buys clothes, that goes to the golf course, that actually has a business, runs things, has a bunch of employees, and then goes out and spends that money and flies to Cancun and flies to New York to see a play. That's who you want. You want more of those upper middle class, or new rich, nouveau riche, as the French call them. In every economy, that's who you want, because they have a tendency to grow and grow and grow and then lift up the poorest. The poorest people start living like the last generation's rich. Now, the globalists say this is bad for the earth. Let's not go shopping. And, of course, there's extremes in that. The wealth does eat up resources. The wealth does cause decadence, to where people get so wealthy, even the poor, they don't care anymore because they've got their cheeseburgers. So there's an equation there where this type of wealth does create a lot of slob behavior and spoiled, rotten kids. And so the elites sit there and they argue, hey, you got a bunch of people that are animals. We're soft killing them. It's come out. They don't care. Let's just go ahead and wipe them all out, and we'll enjoy the life extension, and, you know, we'll end war and set up a global government. The difference is the globalists throughout this entire program They're the ones putting out the GMO and the cross species and the super mutated insect viruses in the food and the zoological disorders cross species and the fission fusion and the antimatter reactors and the Black Manta Sabo armed drones and the particle beam laser blimp installations and all of this stuff that is statistically, I've studied it, absolutely, totally dangerous. And these people are not in control of it. But they're in a race with a few other elites. They don't want the Arabs to get the technology. They've got a double deal with the communist Chinese I'm going to get to in a moment. But they're absolutely in an arms race with themselves, and they're in control of most of the world, but they're not in control with their own internal power structures and the less than 20 families, 1,000 members of that, 6,000 servant superclass that aids them, according to the Kissinger Group, Prospectus Breakdown. Because they have to understand themselves. They publish books, they publish periodicals discussing themselves. Tragedy and Hope, Superclass, Brzezinski's new book. I mean, there's a bunch of them. And it's just all openly discussed there. How they're going to kill us and how they're going to take over. And I mean, you read stuff by Brzezinski written in the 70s, it's all come true. They're about 6-7 years behind, maybe a decade. But if you back it up, and they admit they're behind, and by the way, this is when they're talking to the CFR. They think you're so dumb. He goes on the CFR on television and admits all this. Just leaving tiny membranes of plausible deniability in there where he talks about maybe this isn't a good idea, maybe it is, but this is where it's going. Again, they tell you, Bill Joy tells you in the April issue 2000 of Wired Magazine, why the future doesn't need us. And again, I'm telling you, again, I don't deserve this, and you don't deserve this. I have had the establishment reach out to me over the years, and it's always off record. As a journalist, I can't talk about it, or no one will ever reach out to me again. Intermediaries, presidents, vice presidents, billionaires, you name it, well-known people, to like, Alex, I know it's bad, but you know the elite are bad? Look how ugly the public is politically and how they tear you apart. They hate you. You're never going to help them. You might as well join the establishment and try to work from within. How would you like a show on the national TV? How would you like book deals every, 6 months? How would you like to be, the next Rush Limbaugh? I mean, this is how the system works. This is how the system operates. People that have sold out to the system, they've heard this speech before. Oh, globalism's to raise the third world and to empower them and sure to lower our standard, but we want to lift them up. Then you get the actual inside IMF World Bank prospectus on how they were going to implement the treaty, because governments won't sign on to these, even if they know it's a con job for the public, unless they know the inside deal of what this treaty implementation means. Take the Copenhagen Treaty from 3 years ago at the UN Summit for Global Carbon Taxes. And the third world leaders got it and said, we're right at 195% or almost double the taxes of the West. You were supposed to destroy the West and give us the money, not raise taxes and deindustrialize the West, and then you were going to industrialize us. And see, and that's the public sale of Agenda 21, which is the global zoning rules of eugenics and the post-industrial economy, which on its surface you can say, hey, we shouldn't be so wasteful. We shouldn't be so slovenly. We shouldn't just buy things in some malfunctioning hunter-gatherer mechanism, off the home shopping network and pile your garage up full of junk you never open and crap you don't need. You see, they've got a good sales, but on the level. But this isn't a real debate about nations working together to have real goals and not be so slovenly and honoring men and women in our roles and building society. No, at its heart, it sells the mighty. It sells the virtuous. It sells the good on corruption and evil, but in the name of helping humanity and saving the earth. So that's my real indictment, is that this is a very ugly thing. Now, when we come back from break, I'm going to go over the statistics, but let's start doing this now. There's 7.5 billion people, roughly. Now, Rothkopf and the Kissinger Group, who I've interviewed on air, you can look it up 5 years ago, they came on. And I said, why are you here? And he goes, well, I'd like to talk to you openly and, maybe talk some sense into you. Would you like to talk sometime off air? By the way, John Harmon